Okay, time to talk history now with Dr. Joe Kelly. Caroline's left us 8 or 9 minutes, Joe. It's a disgrace, really. But anyway, we'll try and batter on. Our focus today is on Mad Dog Coll from Gweedore and the New York Mafia. Right, tell us about this character then.
Well, Vincent Coll, he came from Gweedore and born in 1909. He had a short life. He died in 1932. He was gunned down in 1932. But while he lived a short life, he lived a very maybe infamous life at the same time, rising to the ranks within the mafia. He was up there with the greatest mafia figures of the 30s. And at that time, one might know that the bootlegging was going on. Prohibition had been there. There was no alcohol. And so there was speakeasies, and he was very much involved in that whole thing. But he grew up in Gweedore, born in America, in Gweedore, sorry, but went then back to America with his parents. Parents left America to come back to Ireland and then returned again. And things took a bad turn when he went back to America. He was only about 9 months when he went back to America with his mum and dad. The father left them. The mother died of TB. He lost his baby sister, and 2 of his brothers died from TB as well. So he was left very much himself and his closest brother, Peter, who was just a year older than him, 8. He was 7 and Peter was 8. They were left to basically the world, and unfortunately, because of maybe lack of direction and one thing another, they ended up on the wrong side of the law, more hardened young men involved in a lot of petty crimes. And they were put into, their uncle actually put them into an institution, a Catholic kind of orphanage. And even there, they caused terrible, terrible trouble. And their Aunt Mary Field then took them. She was in New York. But eventually, she had to go back to the courts, the Bronx court, saying, look, I can't control these lads.
So what age would they have been at this point then, Joe?
Well, they would have been young. They would have been teenage years. Yeah. Again, they were with their aunt for a number of months, not years. And basically, he was in and out of jail after that. He was growing up in the Bronx. He'd known the tough side of society. He knew the underbelly of crime and petty crime, and whatever he could find a way of making a few pound, he was going to do it. And he was rather brutal. Do you
think he was primed for the mafia to get their claws into him, or was he so angry with everything that he maybe sought out this lifestyle himself?
Well, that's we're living in a different age now, and it's very easy to judge in our own age. The saying is better to build strong children than fix broken men. And unfortunately, this Vincent and his brother and others at that time, they had a very, very hard upbringing in life, and maybe it was easier for them to turn to the wrong rather than the right, and maybe the direction wasn't there. But he obviously had some kind of temperament and personality that seemed to take a satisfaction out of wrongdoing, and he was rather brutal in the way violent in the way he dealt with people, anybody that was threatening to him. Maybe it was a survival mechanism for him. But when he was put into jail anyway a number of times, and when he was released in 1929, now remember he's born in 1908, so he was still a young man, age 21. 2 people came into his life. The first was Dutch Schultz, who was a head man for bootlegging, and he had a lot of different breweries making the alcohol and then supplying it to different pubs. So he employed Vincent Coll to work for him, to encourage other pubs to take his product, to buy his product, and if they didn't, then Vincent Coll would brutalize them and attack them and threaten them. In fact, he killed one man at that time, but he got off because Dutch Schultz was able to pay the judges and the law at the time to kind of turn a blind eye to it. And at the same time, he met this woman called Lottie Denninger, who he later married, and she was very, very influential. A very interesting story even just about her herself. And she was encouraging him to get on in this world of the mafia and to get on in the world of the bootlegging. And when he asked for more money from his partner, Dutch Schultz, who was paying him £150 a week at that time, or dollars a week, which was quite a lot of money, he wanted more and he wanted more, and he felt that he should have his own setup. So he eventually did set up his own gang, and his aim was to get rid of Dutch Schultz, who had actually been paying him all this time. And his later wife, Lottie, she supposedly gave him $20,000 to roll him, to start him out. And she had got that from a husband that died in peculiar circumstances. She'd taken out a life insurance on him 6 months before he died.
She's not going to sue you. He died in peculiar circumstances after his wife took out a life insurance policy. Yeah. Okay, you're afraid maybe her ancestors might take you up on something. But come here. But was it enough? Was the even a successful bootlegging company, and with the money they're able to leverage out of other businesses and all, was that enough for him, or did his ambition? Did he get hungry for more?
Oh, absolutely. And the money he was making was just phenomenal. It's unbelievable in relative terms. You're talking tens of thousands of pounds. And you ask a good question, but the bootlegging enough? No, he was rather cute and mercenary what he did. He realized that there was other ways of making money. So he started to kidnap people on the underworld who would pay him a ransom, but they couldn't report this to the police because they were on the police list. And he started doing kidnapping people. I just take, for example, there was one fella, business legend, Ruby Valley, for £100,000. He wanted a ransom. Someone else, Sherman Bingsley, owner of a club, a night star club, and also a famous restaurant in New York, paid him $25,000. There was Billy Warren, a banker. He kidnapped him, and he was given a ransom of $83,000.
But with every move he was taking, Joe, the target was getting bigger on his back. He was messing with all the wrong people.
Yes, and he had got into a terrible war with his former employer, Dutch Schultz, who was the bootlegger main man in that part of America, in New York that he was in. And he was getting tired of Vincent Coll's attitude and his behaviour. And in one case, Vincent Coll tried to kill his top man, Dutch's top man, and it backfired on him. And what he ended up doing was there was a shootout. And what happened was there was four boys injured and a young 5-year-old was shot dead. And this basically turned the whole media and the whole mafia against Mad Dog Coll, because he was seen as a danger and a man that was bringing the mafia into disrepute.
And in some way, there was, because a lot of the way the mafia and the cartels work, and even to this day in Mexico and elsewhere, as you endear yourself to the population, you're seen as sort of Robin Hood type characters, don't you? I presume that was the case there. He was challenging their set of principles in inverted commas, because obviously they were ruthless.
Yeah, he was, and the fact that he'd killed he was in the shootout that killed a young 5-year-old. He was seen then as the Mad Dog. That's what the mayor of New York called him, and media called him a child killer. And so he had to go into hiding after that, and they realized that he was a problem. But so his time was coming to an end. And again, as I said, he was a very, very young man. He was in 28 when he was shot in the end, but he had crossed over. One of the things that he would do is he was a hitman. He would take money to kill people. And there was one man that that wanted the boss of bosses, Marazona, I think was his name. It's an Italian, and he wanted this opposition man Luciano killed for 50,000, and he gave Coll 25,000 down payment. So Coll arrives to kill this man, but the man that had paid him, Luciano's people knew that this was going to happen, and they killed him in advance. So Coll walked away clean with 25,000. The man that had contracted him to kill the other man, well, he was now dead, but he was seen by the gang that had executed Marciano. They seen that, and he was a marked man after that. They wanted to get him. They knew that he was a contract killer that tried to kill their boss. And so the Irish head man at the time was Madden, and he put out a 50,000 reward on Coll's head. And that 50,000 was like, he was a marked man after that. So every gangster that wanted to make money, there was a 50,000 bonus if you could find Coll. And there was a shootout on one occasion. They thought he was there in an apartment. They shot it, and I think there was a number of people killed, but they got it wrong. He wasn't actually at that place at all. That was in February 1932, and they had killed a number. I think it was 3 people who were killed, but Coll wasn't among that. But that was on the 1st of February 1932. But on the 7th of February, a few days later, almost a week later, they knew where he was, and he was going into a drugstore, and he was making a threatening call. He was cute to use the phone. He moved around from place to place and made calls so he couldn't be traced. And he was phoning this man Madden, who was an Irish warlord, a mafia warlord, well respected within the criminal ends. And he had put out the 50,000 on him. He was threatening him, and he was in on the phone booth in a chemist. He was cute to go in the back of the shop to go and make a phone call, but his assassins had been following him. They were sitting out in the car. They saw him going in. They walked into the chemist. They told the people there, look, keep cool. And they went in and just basically riddled him to death while he was making the phone call in the booth. And he died there. There were 15 bullets in his body when they did the autopsy, and there were more that just would have gone through his body as well.
In his adult life, did he ever come back to Gweedore, or was he buried at home or buried in America?
He was well. That's a good question. So he was only 23 when he died. Sorry, I said 28. It was 23 when he died, and he hadn't known. But there were meetings of Donegal people in New York, and he was shunned there. People didn't like him for they knew what he was doing. And his brother Peter was killed sometime before in a shoot down as well. A shootout. He was killed. So they had known that there was a side to him that they didn't like. But you ask the question then in his burial. He was a Catholic. And he wanted to be, obviously his sister Florence wanted him to be buried, but the pastor, the priest of St. Raymond's Parish in New York where he lived said, no, you're not going to have a burial mass or a priest at your graveside either praying over your grave. So he was allowed to be buried in the graveyard. They reckoned that he'd gone to confessions, by the way, sometime before he was shot, and for that they would allow him to be buried. So he was buried in the graveyard, and his gravestone's still there, buried where his brother had previously been buried, and subsequently his sister. So he was buried in a very quiet, unreligious Catholic burial, and that was the end of Mad Dog Coll. There's a film done about it in 1961, and Brenton Delap has written an excellent book on that, Mad Dog Coll, an Irish gangster in 1999. He would have been the editor of Funches.
Telly Savalas played Mad Dog Coll, didn't he? I mean, did he sort of master the New York Gweedore accent?
Yeah, well, he was involved in the film. There was a number of people in the Gene Hackman was a policeman. I think Telly Savalas, Kojak, he was just.
Did he not play? All right, who played Mad Dog Coll? And
I think it was John Chandler.
Ah, okay, right.
But Telly Savalas, and I love him because The Dirty Dozen and my own name, Kelly's Heroes. Great film. But you're looking, we're giving our age away when we're talking about
listen,
that.
I love him so much. I've styled my hair on him.
And have you a lollipop?
Well, that's for me to know and you to find out. So, okay, Dr. Joe, listen, that's where we have to leave it. I wish we had more time. I wish we had more time. But thank you so much. And me and you have recorded a special podcast too, which will be broadcast at a later date, an extended podcast focusing on the beautiful town of Creasler, and that's already in the bag, and we'll be putting that out, as I say, at a later date, Joe. But just to
say to you, Greg, and I haven't been on since I was on with Father John Joe and TD Marion Harkin when we were doing a review of the paper, and just to acknowledge Highland, you got the mood of the people there with the Creasler tragedy. You were absolutely brilliant in Highland, and people maybe are often critical of our local radios. Whatever Creasler way comes out of this tragedy, it'll be family and faith that'll bring them, and Highland's part of that family. And just to congratulate you on capturing that mood, the fact that you had broadcast the mass and the music, and all of you that were in there in Highland, thank you very much. Even yourself, the hard interview that you had to do with Leonie Harper's parents, to be commended and be congratulated, and thank you very much for all that you do in there in Highland. You really are part of our families in the wider sense of Donegal. Thank you.
Lovely remarks, Joe. I appreciate that. Take care of yourself. Dr. Joe Kelly there.